Welcome students. Today we'll be talking about certain basic ideas, basic concepts of feminist film theories. Now, we must make a distinction between criticism and theory because criticism mainly deals with a single text or a group of texts, while theory would talk about the entire system called cinema, the entire institution called cinema. So, a film theory should talk about the institution of cinema in its totality rather than single or a cluster of films. Now, feminist film theory is guided by feminism. And before we start talking about this, we must have a brief idea about what feminism is. Is feminism a kind of discourse about talking the equality between men and women? Yes, but not only that. Feminism largely is a critical outlook, it's a critical tool, it's a critical take on the order of things where the main presupposition is that the society is biased towards masculinity, biased towards men. Therefore, even a single entity called a woman is not only about the physical existence, social existence of a woman, but is defined. It doesn't that the idea of woman doesn't have any autonomy, but is defined by masculinist or patriarchal cultures. So, what would feminist film theory do? The feminist film theory would do two type of things. It would try to understand that if cinema is an able medium to represent woman in a proper kind of way, to articulate woman's needs, woman's desires, and woman's articulations, is cinema a probable vehicle of it? And what cinema is doing regarding woman, the prevalent practices of cinema, is it allowing woman to speak of herself? Is the image of the woman which is found in cinema, is that of is the image which the woman desires, or is it a image which patriarchy or masculinist cultures desire? So, in this way, we can say that the feminist film theories are simultaneously doing two type of things. It's keeping an eye, keeping a critical eye on the representation of women in cinema, and it's also trying to understand how far cinema as a system, cinema as a form, cinema as a means of expression is actually guided by masculinist cultures or patriarchal ideas, so on and so forth. Therefore, feminist film theory is not only about a demand that woman needs to be properly represented in this medium. It's also thinking about whether woman can at all be represented in cinema as such. Now, cinema is a powerful medium because apparently it's an easy medium. It's an easy medium in the sense that it's based on photography. That is, you photograph what's there in front of the camera. And therefore, it can be thought of that photography is actually can record, look at the society, look at objects, look at bodies, look at people without any preconceived notions. But we should understand that cinema is also a language. And since a language, therefore a language is guided by ideas, guided by concepts. So let's think an idea of framing a woman. That is, we put a woman into a frame, we light her in a certain kind of way, and the camera also takes on certain kind of angles. The camera might need to glamorize the woman, might decide not to glamorize the woman. And these are all ideas which are being imposed on the woman in front of the camera. In a similar kind of way, women, they have their assigned roles in cinema. And therefore, we should understand that feminism is not only about films which concern women, feminism is also not about films which are being produced or directed by women. So, feminism, to be a proper film theory, should be also able to explain a film like Sidney Lumet's 12 Angry Men, where there are no woman characters as such. So, in this way, a proper feminist theory is actually will be able to explain all kinds of cinema. We'll try to understand whether all kinds of cinema, irrespective of its theme, irrespective of the presence of men or women as dominant in the film, if it's guided by patriarchal or masculinist ideas or so. In this way, we should understand that feminist film theory or feminist film criticism as such, born out of those theory, would be about the politics of representation. Now, if we take this phrase, politics of representation, what does that mean? It means two things. One, who is representing and how is she being represented? So, if you think of woman and cinema, we'll see that in commonplace mainstream narrative cinema, there are certain assigned roles of a woman. For example, we can see in mainstream or other kind of films that we can see men in different kind of professions. But mainly we'll see woman would be represented in terms of the family relationships, like the mother, the wife, the sister, so on and so forth. And many a times we will see that morally dubious characters like the Noah, the femme fatale found in film noirs, or the cabaret dancers, or so on and so forth. Certain working women are shown in a morally dubious kind of way. And therefore, if we think of a film like Satyajit Ray's Mahanagar, Satyajit Ray takes this idea of woman being largely portrayed on screen in terms of family and relationships, and women in working place, women in professional roles are less shown in film screens. Satyajit Ray takes this idea in Mahanagar and shows what happens when one woman who is assigned a proper place in the family has to move away outside, move away outdoors, and takes a role in the working sphere. And therefore, entire Mahanagar is about this woman who suddenly has to, because of due constraints and because of certain conditions, has to suddenly change her role into that of a working woman.
আমরা যদি এখানে না আসতাম ওদের কোনো টানাটানি হতো?
ও অবনী ঠাকুরপুর কাছে কিছু ধার চাইবি বলেছিল যে?
ওদের ব্যাপারটা জানা না, ঘাড়ে কিছু পুষে এসে জুটেছে, ফলে দুজনকেই 10টা 5টা করতে হচ্ছে।
দুজন মানে?
হাজব্যান্ড অ্যান্ড ওয়াইফ। Wanted smart and attractive young woman to serve as a sales girl in a respectable firm.
What's wrong with using a little lipstick? You put red here, why not here?
তোকে এভাবে যে কষ্ট ভোগ করতে হবে আমি ভাবিনি।
কি কষ্ট বাবা? কে আমাকে চাকরিতে পাঠিয়েছে? কেউ তো পাঠায়নি, আমি নিজে চাকরি নিয়েছি। আর তাছাড়া আমার খুব ভালো লাগছে।
And in Bengali cinema, we see that when the role of women are politically dealt with, this has been many times a theme. Like we can look back to Megheda Katara, where the main role of Nita, Nita is the protagonist of the film because simultaneously she's doing two type of things. She is being a nurturer of a family, which is the traditional role we see in films of regarding woman, and she is the nurturer of family because she is a working woman. So she goes out to work, she is the only sole earning member of the family, and therefore she can sustain the family in a certain kind of way, and how this leads to a disaster once she actually has to give her job because of certain kind of ailment. So the film deals with this theme.
দেখ খুকি, আমার কদর একমাত্র তুই বুঝবি।
বুঝলাম, চলে যে যাচ্ছিলে কালকে কথা মনে আছে?
আসল কথা কি জানিস মা, জীবন ধারণ করাটা একটা
পেট খারাপ করবে। হ্যাঁ, যে রেটে শুরু করেছেন।
দাদা,
তুই একটা চাকরি করিস না কেন বলতো?
তুমি আয় করবে আর সেই টাকা আমি
সেই তফাৎটা তখন না রাখলেই চলবে।
রীতা
So in this way, certain filmmakers in a political way, they actually take the traditional role of woman in films and problematize it in a certain kind of way. We can also talk about films like Jean-Luc Godard's Vivre sa vie, which also looks at a woman who has to step outside the safe arena of the family into the world of employment.
Moi, je crois qu'on est toujours responsable de ce qu'on fait et libre. Je lève la main, je suis responsable. Je tourne la tête à droite, je suis responsable. Je suis malheureuse, je suis responsable. Je fume une cigarette, je suis responsable. Je ferme les yeux, je suis responsable. J'oublie que je suis responsable, mais je le suis.
So in a way, feminist film theory is not only taking how a woman is being represented or not, but also about how the images are guided by the ideas of woman. So we will see that mainly in black and white era, also in the color era, women are being lighted in a certain kind of way and men being lighted in a other kind of way. The glamour lighting of woman is defined in a certain kind of way and men are being defined in a certain kind of way. So here the notion of difference comes, and the feminist film theorist would now talk about this idea of difference, that why the man and the woman on screen and behind the screen are to be dealt in differently because of their being a man or a woman. And here we come to the next idea, that is the idea of the spectacle and narrative. In this point, one should recall the landmark essay by Laura Mulvey, which is named The Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. So what is Laura Mulvey talking about in this essay? Laura Mulvey is saying that how woman in a very patriarchal way on screen becomes a spectacle. So when the woman, a glamorous woman is being shown mainly in a song dance sequence or mainly in big close-ups in a very glamorized way, the woman seems to stall the entire narrative. The close-up of the woman, it seems to stall the entire narrative, and in that way the woman starts gaining a certain kind of agency, which largely the masculinist narrative mode can't actually accommodate much. Therefore, in this kind of narratives, one often see that this role of a woman who slowly gains autonomy is the narrative which is being spearheaded by the man actually tries to contain that woman. The entire film noir genre will show many examples of this type, where the man suddenly encounters a woman who is extremely attractive, and when she is presented in that kind of way, in that kind of glamour lighting, so on and so forth. And then the entire story is about how this man tries to tame this woman or contain this woman in a certain kind of way, so that the narrative agency is now given back to the man. So in Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, Laura Mulvey talks about these two concepts, the spectacle and the narrative, and how woman is rendered into a spectacle in mainstream cinema, and the entire agency of the narrative is bestowed upon the man. Laura Mulvey's essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema actually is not only a critique of the prevalent ways of filmmaking, but also a kind of manifesto regarding an independent alternative feminist cinema. And Laura Mulvey in this essay says that to make way for a new kind of feminist filmmaking, one has to understand, analyze and destroy the pleasures of prevalent filmmaking, the pressure of prevalent cinema, erstwhile, which is largely patriarchal. And obviously, then the question arises that who enjoyed the prevalent kind of cinema? If the prevalent kind of cinema renders the woman into a spectacle, into a kind of object, then are only men enjoying the classical Hollywood cinema or mainstream cinema as such? So this question is addressed by Laura Mulvey in a second rejoinder to that famous essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. So in another essay, which is called Afterthoughts to Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, Laura Mulvey analyzes few films and tries to understand that how certain kind of cinema, which is largely guided by patriarchal ideology, also woman also derives certain pleasure out of it. And she says that in certain films like that of Duel in the Sun, mainly she discusses the Western film called Duel in the Sun, which centers upon a woman and two men, and the entire film is about what the woman decides with which man to go.
You don't have to stay around here anymore, do you?
Don't never have to do nothing. Stay around here 'cause I like it. Bet you can hit that ding-dong straight off.
Who cares?
Hey, Luke, what's up? Nothing, Ken, just practicing. Can you shoot?
Sure, it's easy.
That's what you said about bareback riding.
All right, I'll show you.
Better not try it. You might hit Ken. Or the mare, more likely. Sure is doggone hot.
Sure is. You know what I'd like to do?
What?
I'd like to take a swim.
You mean it?
Sure, I mean it.
I guess so.
No, if I'm not good enough to marry, I'm not good enough to kiss.
Come here, you bobtail little tweak. That were bespoken, ain't we?
Wouldn't do no harm to tell folks, would it?
Sure.
She discusses how in this essay, even within the patriarchal culture, women are given certain agency. And how does woman actually enjoy this kind of stories? Laura Mulvey says that womanhood is largely a cultural construct. Therefore, and when the infant girl child slowly grows up to a woman, this womanhood is not something which comes out of her biologically. It comes out of, the gender is a kind of construction, it's imposed over the girl child. Therefore, the girl child had a phase in childhood when she can shift between the active / masculine way to the passive / feminine way. And Laura Mulvey shows that how that practice within the girl child of shifting from active to passive actually renders her more susceptible to a certain kind of pleasure, to enjoy certain kind of pleasure in traditional films. Therefore, in traditional films, how woman can identify both with the active hero and the passive heroine. And even when the heroine is both in an active and passive role, she can actually identify with both. One can also get similar example in Indian cinema also. If you think of Hrithik Ghatak's Komal Gandhar, then Komal Gandhar will see, if you look at the entire story, we'll see that how the entire story of Komal Gandhar rests on the idea of Anushka, who is the protagonist of the film, what she decides regarding her life. Will she go abroad with her lover and leave Bengal, or will she stay in Bengal, engage in the local theatre and local political theatre and so on and so forth, and stay here? So this decision to be made by Anushka becomes the main dramatic crux of the entire film.
ওভাবে আর্ট হয় ওরা ব্যক্তিগত অপমান মনে করে অশিক্ষিত
কাল আপনাদের নাটক দেখলাম কয়েকটা কথা বলবো
না
রোলটা ভাবছিলাম।
মুক্ত করো ওই অন্ধকারের এই দ্বার, এসো মুক্ত করো ওই অন্ধকারের এই দ্বার, এসো শিল্পী, এসো বিশ্বকর্মা, এসো স্রষ্টা, এসো শিল্পী, এসো বিশ্বকর্মা, এসো স্রষ্টা, রসরূপ মন্ত্র দ্রষ্টা।
So in Komal Gandhar, Ritik Ghatak poses very intelligently two different ideas. And we see that in Komal Gandhar, Anusua is being addressed as Miranda by her absent lover. And Anusua is also preparing to play a role of Shakuntala in the film, in a play within the film. In this way, Ritik Ghatak says that Anusua can become two different women altogether. She can either be a Miranda of Shakespeare's Tempest, who has no connection with the land she has been brought up in, or she can be Shakuntala of Kalidas, who is deeply engaged within the land, that is within the forest she was born in. And thus, Ritik Ghatak presents us the idea of a woman who can either leave the land she was born in, or she can stay within the land she was born in and engage in a deep kind of way. So what did we learn here? We learned here that Ritik Ghatak, to present his heroine in a different light altogether, actually brings in two different kind of representations of woman. Similarly, throughout the career of Ritik Ghatak, we see that Ritik Ghatak uses the idea of mother archetype. And therefore, Ritik Ghatak tries to understand what the mother archetype means in the traditional patriarchal way, and what the mother archetype might mean politically in a different kind of cinema. And in this way, we see that Subarnarekha entirely is about the lead character, Sita, agreeing to be the woman the way her elder brother wants her to be or not, and also resisting against it and bringing an autonomy of a different kind, and going away, rebelling against the brother's idea, so on and so forth. And Ritik Ghatak uses this idea of woman as a kind of metaphor, the way she is named Sita.
সারাদিন কোথায় ছিলে? আমার খালি খালি লাগছিল।
আমাদের নতুন বাড়িটা খুঁজছিলাম রে।
পাওয়া গেছে?
হ্যাঁ,
খুব চওড়া একটা নদী পেরিয়ে ঠিক তার ধারেই ছিল তাদের বাড়িটা।
আচ্ছা, যে মাকে তুই দেখিসনি, কোত্থেকে ঠিক তার মতো ধমক দেওয়া, ঘাড় বেঁকিয়ে হাঁটা আর গোমরা মুখ করা শিখলি বলতো?
জানি না, যাও।
আজ সীতাকে দেখতে লোক আসছে। আমি শিগগিরই সীতার বিয়ে দিয়ে দিচ্ছি।
আমি সীতাকে বিয়ে করতে চাই, সীতাও চায়।
তুমি অন্যায় করছো দাদামণি।
So, feminist film theory is not only about what is being shown on the screen, but the ideas and concepts which govern the screen, and also the ideas and concept which defines the afterlife of film. The afterlife of a film, of films, afterlife of film movements also depends upon how we remember them. So a feminist film critics or film theorists would say that, let's take for example a film movement like French New Wave. So when we think of French New Wave, the role assigned to the woman will be largely remembered as that of actresses. But if we look back into the French New Wave films, we will see that at least there are two major names will come forward. That is of Agnes Varda, who was a leading filmmaker and who is still active, and that of Marguerite Duras, who was one of the main screenplay writers, filmmakers, one of the main thinking personalities behind the French New Wave. And in one of the films, Jean-Luc Godard, the famous French New Wave director, has said that Marguerite Duras is the mother of French New Wave. In this way, the task of the feminist film theoretician and a feminist film historian would be not only to assess the names which are remembered, but also to unearth names which are already forgotten in the history of cinema because of a patriarchal ideology. And thus, names of erstwhile stars and directors like that of Dorothy Arzner, Ida Lupinho, Mae West, they are now unearthed and proper place is given to them, and their work is made a better assessment about, and how they created a strong presence of themselves within a broadly patriarchal culture altogether. In this reference, one can also remember the figure of Meena Kumari in our culture. Because as you know that Meena Kumari was a big star with a definite tragic kind of image. She was the image of the tragic heroine in a certain kind of way. Now, how did Meena Kumari create those kind of roles? Was these roles written for her by other directors? Now, if we go and to look into her biography as researchers are doing now, then you will see that Meena Kumari was also a poet, and her poems, the mood and ambience of her poems they are very similar to that of the roles she played. So now a different question come altogether. That was she writing her poems in continuation of the roles assigned to her in the films, or was the writers of the films writing roles about her which will be in sync with the poems she wrote? If it's the second case, then she gathers a certain kind of autonomy. So therefore, feminist film theoreticians and historians, they would not only look back what is there on the screen, but they will also look back what has gone behind the screen, what continuously goes on behind the screen, and try to understand that how a new cinema can be visualized, or the older cinema can be critiqued to make a way for a better articulation of woman's desire, a better articulation of woman's political rights and political needs, and also to make way for a better appreciation of woman outside the standard roles assigned to her. So in today's brief lecture, we have seen that we have talked about certain ideas which concerning feminist film theories, and we must say that these ideas are not exhaustive ideas. There are more ideas associated with feminist film theory, but we have talked about certain main concepts, main ideas regarding the politics of representation, the politics of canonization, and how we can look back to cinema as such, the idea of narrative and the spectacle. And we have tried to understand that how feminist film theories criticize, look into, analyze, and make way for newer ideas regarding cinema.